You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. But the things that I was sitting with so terrified, I was so terrified of how I was going to make money and what I was going to do and like what's and how's were getting me down. But when I got clear about the why, suddenly the rest of those things started to fall into place. Hello there, and thank you so much for joining me today for a new episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. My name is Felicia. For those of you who are new around here, I am here to help you with finding strength, finding gentleness, and honestly, finding a heck of a lot of self-love and self-compassion. A lot of what we talk about on this podcast are just those little things that we experience that end up leading us to a revelation about ourselves or some kind of self-exploration. Or a lot of times we're just reminding ourselves that it is okay to be human, to be where we are, and that we don't need to be so hard on ourselves. I know that's something that I have a pattern of doing, is being a little bit hard on myself. And it's something that I've really pursued fiercely as I've get older, especially, is that I just want to live and meet myself with more love and compassion. It's a little bit easier that way, right? So today I have a really special episode, and it is one that I'm just feeling really inspired by and passionate about. And so I'm excited to share this with you. Today's episode is going to be all about the power of knowing your why you do something, why you're pursuing something. It really goes back to finding your passions and being really intentional and mindful with what you're pursuing and putting your energy into in your life. So we are going to just really dive into that topic today. And if this leaves you wanting more, you can also check out the kind of accompanying blog post that I'll be putting out, which is 4 benefits to knowing your why. I highly recommend that as just kind of like a supplement to today's podcast. Or maybe you found the blog first and now you're listening to the why. So I hope that you enjoy how these two kind of work together. And what's really cool is that this subject of kind of finding your why, I think it is a unique blend of needing time to carve out for yourself, time to reflect, time to evaluate, which is a little bit more of a yin energy, right? Like being receptive, tuning inward. But then learning your whys and understanding that and coming to those big conclusions suddenly brings a huge shift into more of that yang energy, where you start to put things into action and actually become very active and doing things to pursue those whys in your life and to make changes and to make space or to get stuff done. So this is a really unique way of considering, we're always kind of moving in and out of these yin phase and yang phases. And I think it's something that I'm always trying to think about and also encourage from you is to find that balance in your life. I think what happens for a lot of us is unintentionally we fall out of balance. And you can kind of see this in yourself. Like if you fall a little bit too yin and you get like in an excess of yin, you might find yourself feeling like really sluggish. And that might lead to you not really pursuing things in your life, which could look a little bit like depression or apathy, or just kind of being in that kind of slow, sedentary, uninspired way of being. And then on the other hand, you can fall into that opposite side where you're in the excess of yang and you find yourself unable to calm down, unable to rest. Your mind is going all the time. Like maybe you're struggling with some insomnia. You're not able to sit still. You're constantly pursuing everything. You're obsessive about things, or that sort of can lead to like bursts of frustration or anger or not being able to settle yourself down. We don't want to be in either of these places. We want to find that natural balance of yes, I'm inspired. Yes, I have things to do. And now I'm coming back to that place of, okay, I'm ready to receive. I'm ready to reimagine. I'm ready to reevaluate. I want to relax. I need to rest. And now that I'm rested, now I'm ready to go again. I'm ready to pursue things, find action, be creative, create something. And then it kind of ebbs and flows. And I love thinking about it this way too, because when we hear that, suddenly we're like, yes, that sounds nice. That's what I want to do. I want to be in a place of balance. And you guys know that we'll kind of use this little yin yang as this transition into today's astro segment. Every week I share just a little bit of relatable astrology for you to just think about and see how it fits into your outlook on the week ahead. This week, we are right in the middle of a new moon phase. So I like to look at it, each lunar cycle in just two phases. One, the new moon phase, and then once we have the full moon, the second half is the full moon phase. And we can kind of also look at each part of the lunar cycle with these different yin and yang flows. And honestly, and you'll see this if you ever look up my lunar guides on the new moon and the full moon, I'm a really big believer that you're not going to have only yang every full moon or only yang or yin every new moon. It's going to change depending on what you're going through, right? Like if you're just landing a new job or if you just got over a huge project, you're going to be in a unique place when that new or full moon arrives. And that same thing goes throughout the cycle, right? Like you have to meet yourself where you are. But regardless, you can use the lunar cycle to really allow you to be more mindful as you move through life and move through your process. I think that so many of us are craving this right now. We want to be more intentional with how we're living, and we want to be pursuing either self-exploration, right? Understanding who we are or why we are the way we are, or how our why fits in with the bigger picture of our lives. Or we really want to be transforming. There's something about where we are right now that we want to change. We want to be a little bit different. We want to be in a different place in our life. And so we're actively seeking transformation. And I really believe that both of those things can really be executed or explored through working with the lunar cycle. So last week, we had our new moon, a new moon in Aquarius, this beautiful sign of communication and originality and social causes that are so much bigger than one individual, but really about the collective. And we can kind of feel this mark as we are in the season of Aquarius right now. And as we kind of navigate this lunar cycle, we're coming back to our why, which is part of the reason I chose this subject for today's podcast. And so last week we had this new moon. And new moons are really a time when we're working with the lunar cycle that we're really setting an intention for ourselves to move through for the course of that lunar cycle. We're sowing seeds, we're being very mindful. And then as we start to pursue those things, we come to this first quarter moon, about a week in. This is when if you looked up into the sky right now, you're going to see the moon just a quarter full. And there's a lot of momentum. I really like to think of the lunar cycle in a circle. So the bottom of the circle is the new moon, and then you kind of have this uphill battle as you move kind of clockwise, if you can visualize a clock. You're moving up, up, up. It's starting to like get your ideas off the ground. And then as you pursue the very far left side, I guess it would be like 9 o'clock on that clock face, you start to feel like, okay, now I figured out my groove. Now I'm going to really put things into action. Now I'm going to pull plans into place. Or I'm going to make phone calls or find the network or clarify my ideas. You're just going to really start to get that stuff off the ground. And this is going to lead you towards the full moon, this place of being able to see it all clearly, being able to then reevaluate or celebrate or just something you would do with a lot of illumination. So we're right in that first moon phase, our first quarter moon phase right now. And so if you're listening to this and it's still that first quarter moon phase, there's a couple of things that you can keep in mind right now that you might find helpful. One, it's that it really is a good time to put your energy out into something, to pursue something, and to pursue your dreams and your goals and your intentions. What can also happen during this time is that you start to get shown where your obstacles are, or you start to bump into some friction. And why that can happen sometimes during first quarter moons is because the moon is it's called a square. It's when there's basically a 90-degree angle between where the sun is and where the moon is, or where the moon was on the new moon and where the moon is now. And squares are when a sign is not really in harmony with each other, because typically our earth and water element signs are a little bit more compatible, and our fire and our air signs are a little bit more compatible. And when we come into a square, we are kind of squaring off with the opposite compatible element. So it'll either be fire and water or earth, or air and water and earth, or vice versa. If all of this is just washing over your head, all of you can think of it just as like, instead of being on the same page, you're doing things in a very different way. And that obviously we know can create a little bit of tension. So if you're feeling that a little bit right now, it's really about figuring out, how do you work with that tension, or how can you learn from that obstacle or that friction? There's always something we can learn. And honestly, usually pausing to figure out, okay, how can I make this a little bit stronger? How can I take this learn? Can actually just give you more momentum and more power as you keep working towards that full moon. And that full moon comes right halfway in the middle of this cycle. So we're really almost there. Now, as I say this, I am pretty sure that you probably fall into one of two camps. You are either loving this, love all things astrology, think it's super fascinating, want to know more, or you could probably take it or leave it and you don't really take that much stock in it and you're ready to move on to something else. Totally fine. But I just want to say, for the people who absolutely love all of this stuff, even if you don't really understand it, even if it kind of washes over you, but you find it interesting, I definitely encourage you to head to my website and check out the monthly self-care guide. This is something that I've been doing for the past couple of years for all of the members of the Patreon. They get it delivered to their inbox every month. And it's kind of this in-depth guide that kind of can hold space for you for the entire month ahead, that kind of goes over themes of the new moon, themes of the full moon, gives you ritual ideas for both, things to work through, and honestly, just kind of a bigger thought to consider as we kind of move all through this. And one of the things that was included in this month's guide that you can check out, that I'll also mention is the final part of this astro segment, is that we just at the end of last week astrologically moved into this period of time which is called all planets moving direct. And what that boils down to is, astrologically, there's a lot of momentum from now until the middle of April where it feels like green lights are happening, where there's not a lot of resistance, where there's not a lot of backtracking, where there's a lot of forward momentum and energy. So this is a really good time to just pursue your heart's desires, to allow yourself to imagine, to stop self-sabotaging, all of those things that you kind of felt like were in your way, or you were solving a lot of problems. I'm not saying that everything is going to magically go right in life, because sometimes life is just hard and kind of sucks. But what would it feel like if you had all green lights in front of you? That is a really cool mentality to have right now as you find your way through the next couple months ahead. So you can read more about it in the guide, or you can just, like I said, let all of this astrological talk kind of wash over you. And we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and really dive into the power of knowing your why. Okay, welcome back. So how I kind of came to today's topic, this idea of understanding the why, your why behind things, is because recently I've been going through this big change. I've been talking about it quite a bit. Essentially, my main business is a photography business, and mostly wedding photography. And this is, a really fun and awesome job. I will be the first to admit that. But the sometimes downside of that is that you have to live your life with this 12 to 18 month out set of commitments that you are totally obligated to. And for good reason, right? Like, these people are investing a lot into this time of their life, into your skills, and they want to be able to count on you even when they're planning super far out. And so for the last 8 years of my life or so, I've been kind of having to every single year just kind of be in the momentum of whatever I have booked the following year. And so I felt like my life is kind of planned around other people's wedding dates. And one thing I've kind of learned about myself, especially the more that I dive into astrology and do self-transformation work and become more honest with myself, I'm a little bit more of the kind of person that enjoys being a little bit more spontaneous. It's kind of weird because I am a planner, but I also like to do things based on how I feel in the moment. You know, I would love to be able to kind of go on a spontaneous weekend trip away, or plan within the next 6 months, a trip somewhere abroad, or bigger things like recently, what kind of led to this transformation inside of me and having to make some changes is just this sitting with this revelation that I'm really ready to start a family. That's something that my boyfriend and I, we've talked a lot about. Like, we're ready to get married ourselves. We'd love to start considering having children. And honestly, like, I haven't ever known how I would possibly do that with all of the things that you have to consider or navigate and run my business. I know plenty of people do it. I know there's lots of pregnant mamas out there who are also photographing and doing things like that. I just don't know if that would work for me. And that's something that I think has held me back from actually actively pursuing that for a long time, is because I'm constantly in this motion of being inside of this wedding grind. And I'm not ungrateful for any of it. It's been amazing. But as I started to really, come out of last year, and last year was a really busy and big and hard year for me for so many reasons, I just started to realize, I'm like, okay, if I really want to have a family, if I really want to have more space in my life, if I really truly want to slow down, can I keep being a wedding photographer? And the answer was no. For me, the answer was no. And so I started to head down this, what felt very scary at the time, road of realizing, okay, it is time for me to put a bow on my wedding career. And that's not to say I'll never shoot a wedding again in my life, but I will not be pursuing it how I have been so actively as the main source of my income and niche and all of that for the last 8 years. It was really, really hard. But being clear about why I needed to make that change, what was on the other side of it, why I wanted that, it really let all of these other things fall into place. And it felt really good. And honestly, it has kind of helped me realize, I'm like, this, working on a bit from within, is so my passion. And this project came up very sneakily for me. It started in the middle of the pandemic, right? The yoga studio that I taught at and graduated yoga teacher training from and everything, it closed down temporarily during the pandemic. And so I thought, you know what? I still want to teach. I still want to connect with people. We're all going through such a hard time. I'm going to start a Patreon page and I'm going to offer yoga through there. And again, this is another story of knowing your why. Why I wanted to do that was not simply because I needed to make income, right? Like I was lucky enough to be doing yoga and teaching yoga because of how passionate I am about allowing people to be more gentle with themselves. And then also sharing this practice that has been so transformational for me in my life. That's what originally got me into being a yoga teacher. And so when the studio shut down temporarily, I wasn't having to start up this business because I needed money, even though there'd be nothing wrong with that. Like we all need to make money. There's zero things wrong with that, except for the fact that it's usually not a very good, well, sometimes it can be a good motivator, but usually not a very good long-term motivator because we need passion in our lives. We need bigger purposes than just making money. Most of us do anyway. So when the pandemic hit, and there's so many people who are no longer able to go out to their yoga studio, and this community and being able to connect with people that we had been connected to for so long went away, I thought, that's what I want. I need more than ever a place to reunite with people. I want to give them a place where they can find that teacher that they liked in the studio, a familiar voice, that familiar practice, and then also modify it to be able to meet them where they are at their houses and their homes and with a different practice, because we're not the same anymore. Like as we were going through the pandemic, we were all realizing like nothing is the same as it was before. And so I wanted a way to do that. And at the time, a lot of my colleagues in the yoga world were starting Zoom classes and scheduling and just figuring out their business in that way. And I thought, I really feel passionate about doing pre-recorded classes because I didn't want to feel like, oh, well, Susie can come to class, but she can only meet at 5:30. And then you've got Debbie, she can only meet at 6. And then which one do I pick? Like, I didn't want myself to be in the position of having to figure out my schedule with other people's schedules. And I didn't want to put anybody in the position of feeling like they had to be somewhere at a specific time, especially when we were all kind of in this crazy haze of 2020. And that knowing that why, knowing what I wanted to give people, that I wanted them to be able to wake up feeling, like, oh my God, I just need to move today. Or I'm so lonely today, I just need to root myself in something familiar. I wanted them to be able to turn to that yoga video at any time of the day. I wanted them to be able to find a quick 10-minute video if that's all they had bandwidth for, or that hour-long video, or a 30-minute shoulder practice, or a 45-minute restorative practice. I wanted to give people options that could meet them where they were. And thus, the Patreon was born. And now, 2 years later, I have, oh my gosh, how many classes do we have now? Well over 75 different yoga classes that are all there in this amazing library. We've got over 50 guided meditations of all different sizes for people to be able to enjoy. And again, that can meet you where you're at. I wanted people to be like, you know what? I'm really excited about something. I need a manifestation ritual. Type that in, boom. I've got this guided meditation for manifestation. Or I need some balance right now. I feel so out of whack. Boom. Look up balance, can find balance. I wanted to create something where it could really meet people where they were. And during that same time came this idea of this podcast. And now that I'm realizing this is where my heart is, this is really what I want to be doing, is I want to be that cheerleader. I struggle with calling myself a teacher because I feel like I am still learning all of the time. But what I do feel like I can do is be that voice that encourages you to pursue yourself relentlessly. And that is what A Bit From Within is about. Sharing takeaways, encouraging others, helpful reminders. And so I'm getting slightly off track. What I want to share is that when I figured out my why I needed to get out of wedding photography, I suddenly figured out how I was going to make money and what I needed to pursue and how much time I needed to put into it and how much clarity I needed to get, honestly, because I'm hoping to become a lot more clear about what I offer and how I can help others as I move through this year. I kind of have a year to figure it out because I still have lots of weddings booked this year. But the things that I was sitting with so terrified, I was so terrified of how I was going to make money and what I was going to do and like what's and how's were getting me down. But when I got clear about the why, suddenly the rest of those things started to fall into place. And I really think that is what happens for so many of us, is when we figure out our whys, the rest falls into place. The other thing that is really important that I've been thinking about quite a bit is that when you have your why, suddenly you find a lot of inspiration and motivation. Like for the past month, as I've been more fully formed in my ideas, I have had so many ideas. I mean, I just have notes and notes and notes in my phone over things I want to share, things I want to create, ideas that I've had, takeaways, things I want to pursue. Literally so many ideas. My mind has just been popping off. And I've had so much more energy than I did. I mean, I took that vacation. I took 4 weeks off in December. And I felt like I spent most of that time. I don't know how many times I worked out or really moved my body during that time. Not as much as I probably should have. And I'm not saying I did anything wrong. I really needed that time to rest and recover. And that was just as important part of my process. You know, actually like going back to the whole yin and yang thing, that was me totally yinned. I was feeling some of the excess too. I was feeling a little sluggish. I was feeling a little bit just going through the motions. And now I feel like I'm going through more of a yang phase where there's a lot of creativity coming in, a lot of ideas, and I have all of this energy. I've even found the time to like get on the bicycle at the community center, go on long walks where I've been able to move my body and start teaching a lot more and start recording more classes. And I've had the energy to support me through that because I feel so clear about my why and I feel so passionate. And I really feel like inspiration and motivation come when you're on the right track. Now, I think what happens for a lot of us is that our whys are not actually our why. They're expectations we've put on ourselves that are from outside of ourselves. So this can happen, obviously, when you've picked a why and you don't actually want to do it. Like for me, I do this literally several times a year where I'm like, I need to lose weight. I need to eat healthier. So I'm going to be doing that. And then my mom says, hey, let's go get Mexican food. And then I'm doing that instead. Right? But Dave, my partner, he's going through a lot of health issues right now. And he found all of this evidence that being on a low histamine diet is going to help his body heal. And you know what? This man that I love that does not always have the best self-control when it comes to food, for over a month, he did not touch one thing, did not deviate, didn't cheat with ice cream or even a glass of wine. Nothing with a histamine in it. He ate the most boring, plain stuff because he was so motivated. His why was, I want to heal my body. I want to feel better. And that why was so big for him that it cut through any of the the distractions or the cravings or all of that stuff that could have derailed him. And that is the power of knowing your why. When you don't really know your why, or it's not very honest inside of you, you're going to deviate from it, right? You're not going to keep up with it. You're going to be more apt to falling off the bandwagon or veering off course because it isn't true for you. And isn't that interesting? How many of us pursue things that we are not actually that passionate about or that interested in? And for why? Because we feel like we need to be something else. And you have to ask yourself, where did those thoughts even come from? Are they things that were projected on you in your childhood? Are they things that you gathered through your teenage years? Or things you noticed other people get validated for that you somehow subconsciously started to realize like, oh, I started to believe that I needed to be that because I saw other people get validation for that. Those things are so misleading and can really, honestly, keep us off track of our own purpose and our own values. We do not need to be like anybody else. And this is something that I have come back to over and over again as a business owner. In fact, I feel like it is probably the thing that I am most passionate about as a business owner is look in front of you. Understand why you do what you do, and don't do things the way that other people are doing them just because other people are doing them. So I'll give you a couple examples of this, and you'll see how they definitely translate to more than just being a business owner. But when I first started doing wedding photography, Instagram was like a very big hot thing, and people were creating these amazingly curated galleries. Like they were beautiful, and they'd be like absolutely stunning, like model-esque people. And they would be in these amazing remote locations that, people hiking to the top of 14ers and having all these photos. And I felt like, oh my God, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, why don't everyone I book look like that? Or why can't I find places like that to go shoot in? And then I started to find out, like through the grapevine, like a lot of these people were doing styled shoots, and they were hiring their most gorgeous friends to go out and shoot with them so that they could have these model-esque people on their feed. And then I started to find out through the grapevine that there were a lot of photographers who wouldn't even show their couples on their Instagram feeds because they only wanted to showcase a certain kind of people. And I felt like I could start to see behind the curtain of all of this. And I felt like, I don't want anything to do with that. I also realized after doing a couple of sessions, like way out in the mountains, or I'd have to travel for a long period of time, that it really drained me. I am not the kind of person that wants to be in the car all day. I don't like long drives. It's not the best thing for me. I'm not creative when I get there. I feel drained. I feel tired. And so for me, I realized pursuing that kind of photography isn't what I want to do. Also, when I got clear about my why, I love telling people stories, and I want to work with any couple who is a good fit for me, who cares about their marriage that they're going to have after their wedding, who really want to honor this time period in their life, and who maybe don't feel comfortable in front of a camera, but they trust me to be able to help them be that way. I want to tell their stories, and I want to photograph them. And unless a couple has specifically told me and kind of negated the model release and said, don't share my pictures, I have posted every single couple that I have shot over the years on my Instagram. Because why do I do Instagram at all? I never did Instagram to book people. I did it it's part of the experience of what I'm doing. It's telling people stories, and a place that my clients can be hyped up and see their awesome pictures on the feed and understand how it's part of this bigger story of all of these love stories that we're telling. And I want people to see themselves. I don't want to have this I never wanted to fall into this thing that was like curated with only specific kinds of people. I wanted to show whoever I'm working with. And that was such a big clarity thing for me that it helped me figure out what actually to pursue and how I was going to navigate it. And it honestly really helped me keep focus on what was in front of me, how I booked clients, who I wanted to book, who I wanted to work with, what I wanted to showcase. That all became a lot clearer the less I looked to other people in my industry. And I think you can do that same thing for yourself. Even if it's not with business, like you can see, how much do I judge myself or put these expectations on myself that are things that I feel like my friends are doing or my family has done? Are those things that are true to you? Do you work out every day because it is something that you genuinely love doing, like you love to move your body? Or do you do it because you feel like you have to look a certain way? And if you do it for that, is it such a deep wound for you that you do that regardless and it fully forms your why? I call it a wound because I guess it's a little bit of my perspective on that lens. I also know plenty of people who do feel that way. And guess what? They end up either burnt out and missing, at least 1 week worth of workouts a month because they're burnt out. Or they fall off off the ladder. They don't have the motivation for a while, or they get sick, or they get hurt. And all of these things keep popping up that keep them in this hamster wheel. So instead of actually pursuing this fitness or this routine or this fitness goal, they're just on this hamster wheel running and running and running and feeling like, well, I have to work out. I need to get this many miles in. I need to lose weight. I need to be in this calorie deficit. And I look at some of these people and I think, where is the joy in what you're doing? Because I tell you what, I also have friends who are like avid runners. And I have friends who have run marathons or half marathons. And I tell you what, when those people are training for those things, that cycle that I described prior is not happening to them. Even if they do get hurt, when they're like, I'm training for a half marathon. I cannot wait to cross that finish line. That is their why. I want to prove to myself that I can run this half marathon. If they do get hurt, they are doing all the things they can to heal. They are doing physical therapy exercises. They are bandaging it. They're icing it 3 times a day. All of their passion and energy that went into pursuing that half marathon is still there and spent in ways to rehab themselves and heal themselves. And even like they might even spend time like researching, okay, well, in the meantime, I'm going to read this person's book about running, or I'm going to research tips on like how to find a better stride, or I'm going to look up this thing. Like they are staying in it. Even though their physical energy can't go to running the thing, they are still pursuing it because they know their why. And I think that is such a big contrast, right? Like we can see the difference between the two. That is the difference between moving through life with your why or just kind of bumbling around, not really sure of what you're doing. Now, I just want to say, when you hear examples like this, you might think, oh, this needs to happen very quickly. Like I need to sit down right now and figure out my why and then change my life. Sometimes it can be that simple, but other times this is a slow process. When I first started having those thoughts, like, I don't know how much longer I can do this wedding photography stuff, or I don't know what my life is going to be like if I don't figure out when I'm going to stop. Those thoughts started like a year and a half prior to me actually being able to pull the trigger. And then even once I pulled the trigger, I feel like it took a month of kind of floating in between until I really got solid on it when I started to put it into action. And then came a lot of the inspiration. So depending on what you're navigating and what you're moving towards, this could be a slow process for you. So please don't feel like, one, I want you to be encouraged, and I want you to feel like you can find your why and know all of these benefits and feel it and go for it. But I also want you to know that if you're not quite there, that it is okay to meet yourself fully where you are at. A lot of times when we feel lost, we feel like there's something wrong with us, or we feel like we're broken. And I never want anything that I say here to lead you to that conclusion, because you are not broken. Just because you're lost, that's not even a bad thing, right? Like, sometimes you have to get lost to figure out where you're supposed to go. Or maybe you were supposed to get lost to avoid you from being somewhere else where something different would have happened. Like, I am truly a big believer that we are where we are for a reason. We are learning something from the place in our life that we are. And the other thing I'll say on this is that sometimes in life, when we're navigating really big transitions, our why is just to round the bend, right? Like, if you're recovering from something that was really traumatic or that was very exhausting, you might need to recover. And so pursuing more yin activities and resting more and doing very small scale things and really working on rehabbing yourself could actually be the why, right? Like, you want to feel better. And so in order to feel better, you need to take it easy right now. You need to not overdo it. You need to not fall into all of these patterns of action and doing and expectations and things, because you're not really there. And that is extremely, extremely valid, right? Like, the rest that we need to pursue sometimes, and the time away, and the time to reflect, or the time to explore, those are just as integral and valid as the moments of our life as the doing and the achieving and the pursuing. And that is why I brought up at the beginning this idea of like, we have to find balance. So if you were just in a period where you were all go, 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 and you were really blown out in this yang energy, it's okay if the rebound is a little bit more yin. And, we got to kind of take those far swings of the pendulum and try to find ourselves a little bit back more towards the middle. But we can't rush that process. We can't force it just because we want it in that exact moment. And the last thing I'll share here in this, kind of as we end this and we kind of think about some of these disclaimers, and I want you to really consider where you are, is that one of the biggest questions that I had as I was considering today's topic is how do you find out your why? And I'm not going to be here to sell you a course on that, at least not yet, or tell you to go off on like an 8-day journey across the mountains in order to figure it out, or a retreat or something like that. In our society, we do have this idea that we're always just one course away, or one YouTube video, or one TED Talk away from a revelation. And I don't think that's the truth. I think that's the same mindset as, I'm just going to pop a pill in order to fix this thing that's wrong with me. And sometimes those things help, right? Sometimes a pill can help. Sometimes a TED Talk can help. Sometimes a podcast, maybe like the one you're listening to, can help support you. But the truth is, I think how you find out your why is you practice. You practice it, and you do that by starting with smaller things and then moving up towards bigger things. And if you feel pretty good about finding your why most of the time, like maybe it's just a matter of going to carve out 45 minutes where you can be quiet somewhere and just journal about it. Journal about the problems that you're having. Journal about the obstacles. Journal about maybe you start with all of the hows. How am I going to do this? How am I going to blah, blah, and then you're like, what is the bottom line? What am I missing between the lines? Why do I want all of these things, right? Maybe you start with all of the things you want, and then you start to consider, does this really match with my values? Does this really match with where my energy is going? So I would say that is a really good place to start for the bigger stuff. But if you just want to practice in the meantime, start with little things. Start with saying, why do I always park in this spot in the grocery store? Like, I don't know about you, but I pretty much have a rhythm where I park in the same spot in the grocery store over and over. Why do I do that? Well, I do that. I like to look for the spot where the cart thing is pretty close. That makes me feel like I'm going to be more efficient when I'm leaving. Or when I used to live in a different area, I always parked in the spot that was less busy to get in and out of. And that felt really good for me because I didn't want to constantly be in the lanes where there's 20 million people and cars all the time. That's a why. Knowing my why is half the battle, right? Other things that you could practice the why on are like, why do I hang up my clothes in the order that I do? And maybe there you realize, oh, I've never really thought about it. Maybe that's why my clothes are always in this crazy order and I can never find what I'm looking for. And then all of a sudden, once every couple months, I see that shirt that I love that I forget about. Well, maybe you really care about clothing and you really want to be able to find that shirt. And so you start doing it in a different way because you want to have clarity over what your options are. I think it can be really valuable to start there with practicing figuring out your whys for those small things. And then you can start to translate it to things that you're really more passionate about, like what are things you want more of in your life? And as you answer those questions, like I want more time with my family, or I want to pursue something that's more rewarding, or I want to do this amount of work each week, or I want to pursue this. You start to really consider those themes in your life and you ask yourself, why do I want to do that? And then maybe you start to figure out how you're going to implement that and make more time for it and find that inspiration and motivation. So, all right, you guys, I think that covers a lot of it. Let's end today with a card drawing, shall we? Today I've got the Affirmators Love and Relationships deck. I love this deck. For those of you who are this maybe your first time listening, every week I have this a deck of cards and I just pull one random card, and it kind of, I feel like, is this message from the universe that kind of adds a secondary layer to the conversation that we just had. So today, shuffle the deck. Oh. Listening. I activate my receptive side and become an engaged, intuitive, professional-grade listener. Supercharged listening gives me the ability to not only hear the words others are saying, but also to perceive the emotions hiding behind their words. Armed with this knowledge, I'll be in a great position to give them exactly what they need. I love that. And I really feel like this is not just talking about, listening to others, but I feel like this is a message from the universe saying we've got to be able to listen to ourselves. And I love that how it starts with when I activate my receptive side. That receptive side is our yin side. It is that side of us that can be a little bit more quiet, that can be more reflective, that can be intuitive. And we live in such a yang culture. It is all about post this, show this, do this, achieve this, have this success, work this many hours. And if we really want to find that balance, we have to have time just to close our eyes as we maybe sit in a bathtub and just feel, what is our heart saying? What are our values saying? What is our why? So I think that is a perfect place to leave this. As always, you guys can find me out there. I've got our website, abitfromwithin.com. It has some classes you can purchase if you don't want to be a member of the Patreon, although the Patreon is an amazing place. And on the Patreon, we do have 2 live classes a month where we actually have time to connect before. And I tell you what, those connect and yoga classes are some of my favorites because we always have such valuable conversations beforehand about all kinds of things. Last week, we were talking about accepting our body as we go through changes, like especially as you get older, things change. You kind of just have to accept your body with where it's at. And we talk a lot about it in relation to yoga, but we talk about other things too. So if that seems like something that would be a great fit for you, please check out the Patreon. There's lots of options there. Or you can just come here every week listening to the podcast. If you have other people you know would benefit from listening, please feel free to share it or leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to these podcasts. And I promise that's the last kind of plug I'll share as we sign off. I am sending you so much love. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and until next time.